He was a former minister of this department.
He didn't say that he wouldn't either, did he?
Well, he said that he doesn't see the necessity, but he would look at it.
Okay.
And if I misquote him, I'm sure he'll correct me. That's my understanding of where he is today. Because we've asked some questions out in question period. We've got no better response. But the office of the Child and Youth Advocate opened November 2002, and that was by Roger Grimes' government in response to the Turner inquiry, the death of Zachary Turner at the hands of his mother.
Right.
And there was no department, and for 5 years, the advocate went forward and did whatever work he or she, and we've had a number of them, could do. And in 2007, Deloitte did a review and said that they reviewed Child, Youth, and Family Services, and they made some observations that the Child, Youth, and Family Service program wasn't working ideally. And then in Budget 2009, this government, to their credit, they introduced the creation of the Department of Child, Youth, and Family Services. So in that part, that's really a jumping-off point. And then, so we have the Child and Youth Advocate maintains her own office. She's a completely independent person. That's Ms. Chafe, and she's been doing reports, but she doesn't get regular access to regular information. So, for example, in August 2011, she released Joey's story, and she said at that point one of her recommendations is a protocol must be developed with Child, Youth, and Family Services and the office to ensure immediate reporting to her of any critical incidents or sentinel events occurring with children and youth throughout the province. Mm-hmm. She said the same thing in 2012 on another report called Turning a Blind Eye, and another one later in 2012, September 2012, Out of Focus. And these were events where children have been either died or have been severely harmed. And she would find that this through a public reporting or hearing about it in court. She had no official way from government to know what was happening to the children.
Now, while the Premier, when he was running for the job, said that he didn't see any need or benefit from making this legislation, can you, or have you heard, or can you imagine any reason as to why we would not? What's the downside?
There doesn't seem to be any downside whatsoever. I don't know if it's a general government fear. They don't seem to be very open. And Ms. Chafe said in June this year, she said that she was doing an investigation into 4 investigations, then she added 2 more, and there were, and in these cases, 3 of these total 6 children died. So she announced she's doing this investigation, and along comes CBC in August after doing an ATIP with the government, and they, in the story they carried, 26 children had died since the department was formed. Mm-hmm. She only knew about 6 of them.
Yeah.
And of the 26 who died, we have a list of how they died. 3 were in care of the province. 18 were in protective intervention, which means that CYFS was overseeing the family. Mm-hmm. 3 were in youth services. 3 were in youth corrections. For the cause of death, 8 were medical, 12 were accidental, and there were 6 suicides.
Yeah.
So the story broke. It came forward, and then all of a sudden, the minister came back and was very, I presume, apologetic because they had missed 7 of them. There were 7 more. 2 more died during that period, and then there were 7 more, and there were 4 medical, 2 accidental, and 1 suicide. So we've got a bit of an epidemic here, and it's an epidemic of not having hands on what's actually going on.
Well, it's not obviously a situation where you're necessarily going to change the situation, but there certainly seems to be an awful lot of either miscommunication or lack of communication generally. I can't imagine. I'd love to hear why. I guess in his estimation, things are being handled now, and the tools are all there to, in future, keep the child and youth advocate informed, but certainly if it's in legislation, then it's guaranteed, right?
But they're not in place. There's nothing in place.
Yeah.
The Minister Collins said a second search was carried out after a senior staff member questioned whether there could possibly be more deaths. You're talking about September. This is only 2 months ago. And he said the department contacted the Office of Chief Information Officer, and they asked him to come up with a customized search. And the minister, to quote the minister, they actually developed a tool in conjunction with the department, and we applied that to the data we had, and we turned up 7 additional cases where children had died. The minister, in response to a question in the House this week, said the process was tedious, and if they have mandatory and immediate reporting, we feel this will be better. As soon as the child is in a severe situation, a sentinel is something, the child is really in harm's way, or has had a major assault, or has had some catastrophic thing happen to the child, even pre-death, then the advocate will be the person who speaks for the child and would know. It's too late when the child is dead, and we're not even being notified. She's not being notified when the child dies.
Ms. Bennett, in the interest of time here, I want to move on to another question. I was just curious, how many of these private member bills actually get through, well, even if they're from the ruling party?
Occasionally they come through. Sometimes what the government will do is with their majorities, they will amend them. So we may put one in and they will amend it and take out words they don't like, putting words they do like, use their majority, and then sometimes it looks like what we started with, and sometimes it doesn't. That way, if it's something that they think they might want to go along with, or they don't want to publicly defeat, they put in some amendments that they can live with and basically water it down or change some focus, and then they all pass it, and then they issue a press release which says that they've done it and they've passed it.
They make it their own, essentially, yeah. And that probably has been the case regardless of who's been in power over the last number of decades. Well,
probably. A big one that they defeated was one on fracking. We brought in a private member's resolution a year and a half ago on fracking, asking for updated regulations to have the best in the country, and the NDP supported the Liberal opposition on that, and the government said, nope, our processes are just fine up till now, and all of a sudden they got a lot of pushback on fracking, and then they decided to have a moratorium. And in the first place, if they had gone ahead and said, yeah, we'll update our regulation, we will know what's going on, they waited for the outcry, and in this case, with all these dead children, they've waited for the outcry. Hopefully we can put enough pressure on them this afternoon and tomorrow and next weekend, and your listeners will say to God, you've got to tell the advocate when the children are in severe harm's way, or when they die, for sure you've got to tell the advocate.
Rest assured that if and when the Liberal Party forms government, they will be immediately looking at bringing in this legislation so it's mandatory.
That's an absolute commitment.
Okay. Now, I can't let you go without asking you one more thing. And unfortunately, we're going to have a very short answer, probably impossibly short. But the CETA agreement, big stink now, but the $400 million fund, how did this get to be, November 19th, 2014, after all the hullabaloo about CETA and the dropping of the NPRs in favor of this $400 million fund, and not know what we can spend it on?
Well, I'm not sure that we know, because we didn't know at that time. And Dwight was asking questions in the House on that yesterday and today. Or if he hadn't been asking questions, it probably wouldn't have come out even yet. But I don't know if they oversold it to the people to make it look like it's a better deal than it is. Although the 400, is it a good deal or not a good deal? Or I don't know if they're just trying to position right now so they can pick a fight with Ottawa, because they need an election issue. And the host on the Fisher's broadcast said yesterday, well, maybe this is just a provincial government trying to pick a fight with Ottawa, because they're so desperate for an issue. They want to make it look like we've been hard done by when they did all the deal themselves. So if it was a bad deal, they've brought it on themselves. But I'm not sure that it is a bad deal. They may just be playing with it because they're really backpedaling right now. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
But there's no stopping the CETA deal now. I mean, if all of a sudden we find out that we're restricted in terms of what we can do with this money, then it's pretty much a lost cause. We've signed before we had any confirmation of our ability to do that.
Pete, actually, we don't really know. I don't see how we can stop the CETA deal.
No.
But we don't know the insides of the whole transaction, what it can be spent on or what it can't be spent on, because government was bragging it up down here in their big announcement at the rooms, and I was the only non-government person there, and said, well, we don't know, and I raised some issues because I was a Fisher's critic. Meanwhile, Ed Fast was up in Upper Canada, and he was saying that this is really for job readjustment, for displacement. So the story that the feds were putting out was different than what the province was putting out. So we just don't know. But you can be assured that the opposition will stay on them until we get the nuts and bolts of this one out into the open, because there's either a problem or there's no problem, or they're trying to manufacture a problem because they need an election issue.
All right. That's all we can do on that today. I appreciate the call. Let's talk again soon.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All the best.